Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it is now our great pleasure to invite you to the content of episode 1, the story Reburial from the series The Mysterious Taoist Master, story by Kevin Truongle, narrated by Dean Shadow. The croaking of frogs by the rice fields, the chirping of insects, resounded steadily. Then, suddenly fell silent as a flashlight beam flared up, accompanied by the sound of footsteps, squelching through the muddy ground. There you are. Got you now.
Second frog.
Put the frog you just caught into the basket hanging by your side. Thuan continued to shine the flashlight ahead. This was specifically Thuan's job. During the day, Thuan worked as a laborer at a brick factory. Coming from a poor background, he had to rely on himself. His parents passed away early, and Thuan lived with his grandmother, the two of them. His grandmother worked hard to raise Thuan into adulthood. When Thuan turned 16, his grandmother, weakened by old age, also passed away. It has been 5 years since his grandmother's death. Thuan has been living alone in a house made of thatched walls and a palm leaf roof located at the far end, Phuong Bai Village, Phuong Chau Commune District. It was a poor village, and the villagers had to struggle and scrape by just to have enough to eat each day. Thuan himself was no exception to that harsh reality. In fact, it was even harder for him since he had faced hardship from a young age, being an orphan with no father or mother. Although fate had been cruel to him, it seemed, he was blessed by the heavens with good health. By nature, Thuan was hardworking and diligent. Never shying away from hardship, he worked hard at the brick factory, while others would head home and collapse into bed, sleeping soundly until morning. When everyone else was asleep, Thuan would strap on a basket, wear a headlamp, and head out to the fields to catch frogs. During the summer, after heavy rains, it was frog breeding season. There were nights when Thuan could catch several kilograms of frogs. The frog spearing work helped Thuan earn extra money, extra income, extra expenses. During those times, life was a little less harsh for Thuan, but that was the story of a few months ago, back when the rains were frequent. Like at night, the croaking of frogs would fill the air across the vast open fields. In the late night, it would be quiet. But now, as the weather is transitioning into autumn, everything has become dry, and catching frogs has gotten much harder recently. From 10 p.m. until now, almost midnight, Thuan had only just caught his second frog. 2. Thuan sat down on the dirt by the edge of the field. Thuan clicked his tongue. Looks like I'll have to find another job to do. Staying up so late like this please pay. Thuan turned his head when he saw a flashlight shining brightly toward him, along with the sound of someone wading through the field right next to him. How's it going? Caught many yet? How a fellow? Friend of Thuan's called out. Thuan let out a long sigh and said, 2 frogs. After the rainy season, they all disappear somewhere. Where did everyone go, man? Hey? Hao dipped his hand into the puddle and washed it. Wash your hands. That's right. Question. Thuan, you are definitely better than me. That's right. They'll crawl out after they give birth. Into the cave, a place to avoid raising children, he calmly said. It was meant as a joke, but after saying it, Hao realized he had accidentally touched on Thuan's situation. Hao quickly tried to make amends to the situation. Oh no, he exclaimed in an attempt to fix things. I'm sorry, man. I was just joking. I didn't mean anything by it. Please don't take it to heart. Thuan smiled faintly. It's nothing. I know you were just joking. But listen, even though it's tough and the frogs are hard to catch, I still see Not can catch a lot. Just yesterday morning at the market, I saw him dump out the basket that must have filled half a tub. Hao immediately furrowed his brow. Newt? Which Newt are you talking about? Thuan continued. Newt, son of Mr. Nam, who lives at the head of the canal, ditch section across the bridge next to the cemetery. How immediately stuck out his tongue. Ah, the Black Stork kid. That Brad is good snooping. Say he's Mr. Nam's son, and I know who you mean, but we all just call him the Black Stork? No wonder he's so good. Knew his real name was Nut. I know the spot where he catches frogs. The only question is whether you dare to go there or not. All right, Thuan immediately asked. Where is that place? I only ever see him out in the field spearing frogs like us. Is there another spot? How laughed. That place you just mentioned earlier. Thuan clicked his tongue. If you know where it is, just say it already. Stop being so cryptic. How am I supposed to know? You don't even go there to catch frogs. You're out in the fields past midnight and only catch one. What's the point? Really? Hao let out a sigh. The cemetery over there. By the canal. Do you dare to go there? That Black Stork kid, he catches frogs there? They say many frogs there and each one is fat and plump. Makes sense. Until now, none of our folks have dared to go there, so of course there are plenty. And yet, indeed, that little brat would go alone, carrying just a torch, hunting frogs all night. And he wouldn't even sell the frogs in the village. He always took them up to the district market to sell. Crazy, I tell you, absolutely. Why's that? Hao laughed. Just in this village, everyone knows he catches frogs. In the cemetery, people are too scared to eat them. Just looking at those frogs, they're huge, so fat, and their skin is dark and black. They say he even caught an old frog with hard horn-like bumps all over its back. The villagers told him to release it, but he wouldn't. He took it up to the district market to sell, and it fetched the price even higher than fresh shrimp. Lots of people from the city even placed deposits in advance, awaiting it, and they'll eagerly snap it up. Thuan clicked his tongue. So they catch them at the cemetery. Huh? Honestly, I never would have thought of that. I've never gone frog hunting there before. But why be scared? A frog is a frog no matter where it is. Out there, no one catches frogs. Frogs are big, fat, and there are giant frogs. That's totally normal. Hearing that, Hao scoffed. Come on, tough guy. Since forever, the people in our village are superstitious. Everyone says cemetery is a place for burying the dead. A sacred ground, not a place to cause disturbance. And that guy is just about to be banned by the village elders from going to the cemetery. Thuan heard that and asked, why is it forbidden? Everyone. People who are afraid, let them be. But it goes. What harm does catching frogs do that you ban it? How? That's true, you know, but the other day, Mr. Tu went to visit his wife's grave and found a clear footprint right on the grave. There are several graves around that area, with prints muddy on the layer of white lime. They guessed it was the Black Stork boy. Mr. Tu then reported it to the village chief. The families with dirtied graves came to Mr. Nam to demand that the Black Stork boy be held accountable. Village chief told Mr. Nam Stop Black from going to the cemetery to catch frogs anymore. They forbade him. If he gets curious and sneaks out, who could stop him? For all we know, he might still be wandering around the cemetery right now. Hao kept talking while Thuan just sat there, staring blankly, deep in thought. Hao raised his hand and said, Hey! What? Let me tell you, you figure it out. To the cemetery to catch frogs, right? As for me, I'm not going anywhere. Thuan turned to Hao and asked, Is it true that selling them in the district town gets a better price? Hao nodded. Yeah, I heard they fetch a good price. Some people even paid double the usual rate. Catching them at the cemetery? Really? Thuan immediately replied, During the day, I work at the brick factory, and at night, this is the only side job I have to earn a little extra. These past few days have been pretty much a waste of effort. I need the money, man. Then, just make sure not to dirty anyone's grave, and it'll be fine. Looking up at the night sky, Thuan guessed it was probably just past midnight. From here to the cemetery would take about 20 minutes, if what Hao said was true, that the cemetery had lots of big frogs. Then just hunting until morning would yield a decent haul. Feeling antsy, Thuan stood up. Just fumbling around here until morning won't get us anywhere heading to the cemetery. Now, if you're not coming, I'll go alone. All right. Without giving Hao a chance to say anything, Thuan hurriedly strode along path by rice fields. Just as Thuan had guessed, it was only 12:30 a.m. The young man, reckless and wild and free, carrying a basket, barefoot alone with a flashlight in hand, pinned straight to village cemetery area. Phượng Bãi. The heavy basket swayed, and the two frogs inside suddenly jumped up, croaking loudly, croaking sound. When Thuan stopped walking in front, the faint outlines of the villagers' graves, the graves of the people, appeared. From the village were buried here after they passed away. The story that Hao told was true. Unlike the rice fields, here the frogs' croaking echoed like music, rhythmic and steady. The crisp croaks in the dead of night in this desolate place made a frog hunter like Thuan feel a surge of joy and excitement. Thuan was literally overjoyed. This is it. With croaks this loud, they must all be giant frogs. Just wait. I'll literally catch them all. The cemetery of Phượng Bãi village was historically separated, lying across the canal. On this side of the canal was where the villagers lived, and on the other side were the fields and land for growing crops. Crossing the bridge over the canal and continuing straight along the dirt path would lead to the cemetery area. The villagers of Phượng Bãi had always been very superstitious, but that wasn't necessarily a bad thing because they were earnest and meticulous when it came to worship and the construction of graves. It was, after all, a good thing. For the elderly, they held the belief that after a person dies, their soul remains to watch over and bless their children and grandchildren. Offerings, incense, and rituals had to be maintained. Worship must be complete. That is why the village cemetery sat in a separate plot of land. The village elders said was necessary those who had passed away could rest in peace and tranquility, avoiding any disturbances, noise caused by living. As a result, only occasionally would someone go to the graves to clear away weeds, or a family would visit, offer incense in a memorial ceremony of their loved ones, so as not to disturb the spirits. Almost all the residents of Phượng Bãi village were buried in this cemetery after they passed away. This, said mostly because of Thuan's grandmother, was not buried here. 7 years ago, Thuan's grandmother passed away, right when the village was suffering from a failed harvest. The drought left the fields barren. Without any irrigation water, whatever they planted would die. The village was going through extreme hardship. Even the families, considered well off at the time, still had to eat rice mixed with other fillers. As for the poor households like Thuan and her grandmother, thin gruel. Another would be wild vegetables, and even drinking water had to be rationed. Perhaps it was also because life was so difficult that Thuan's grandmother gradually became exhausted. He lived a full life, and then, unfortunately, he passed away. There was no money for a funeral, not even a coffin. On the day she died, Thuan's eyes were teary, his heart was torn apart. The 16-year-old boy was all alone, with no one to cling to, when his grandmother drew her final breath. Thuan ran to ask the villagers for help, but they were struggling just to survive themselves. So how could they possibly help? The villagers weren't bad people, but truly, they had no way to help. Thuan, the village chief, and a few others came to Thuan's house. Seeing the frail old woman, one of her arms hanging limply off the bed, touching the ground, the village chief closed his eyes. She passed away. We don't hold a funeral. We still have to definitely bury her. Right, a local responded. We'll need to buy a coffin, even if we just take her to the cemetery. And dig a grave without holding a funeral? We still have to prepare the body properly. Yes, look at Thuan, look inside the house, where there was literally nothing but a single rickety wooden bed where the old woman was lying. The village chief stammered, "The boy is still so young, and everyone in the village. How is it that all the villagers... No, or I go collect funds each house to buy a coffin for the grandmother and grandson. Even just an egg, or would that be okay? When hunger and poverty are so truly real, people tend to become selfish." At the mention of collecting money to buy a coffin, the few people who had come with the village chief all lowered their heads, staying silent, not absolutely speaking. Thuan, crying uncontrollably and loudly, someone let out a sigh. Even the village chief knows that right now, every household in our village is struggling, asking everyone to sympathize. Look at my own child, who's been sickly for nearly a month now. We don't even have a single coin to buy medicine. We've had to pick herbs and grind them up for him to drink. Our house has no rice left. Now you ask us to chip in money to buy a coffin. Where do you think we would get it from? Another person agreed and added, He's right. We don't even know if the living will make it through this year. I wonder if I can get through this year, is dead. No money for food. Where do we get the money to contribute? Do we have any? I can only contribute to dig a grave and bring the old lady. To her grave already meet the bonds of... You can't blame the villagers. Even the chief is dire. The village chief is also in trouble. Situation just like theirs. If there's anyone to blame, it's only the heavens' fate and the relentless grip of poverty that refuses to let go. Soft, gentle background sound. Sound. This is a sound effect. At this moment, the village chief said, "Then what should we do to make it right? We can't just bury the old lady like this, can we? No way. When burying the dead, there must be coffin, so that later on their remains can be properly reburied. Not to mention, the cemetery is on marshy land. When digging the grave, water seeps in. How can we bury her like that? The person who was just lamenting about their sick child, oh dear. Old man, you're worrying too much. The person hasn't even got a coffin yet. And you're already thinking about reburial. During war, people died rapidly, and during the famine, corpses were piled on top of each other, scattered everywhere. Dig a hole and toss in. Just cover it with soil and it's done, no coffin. Then I wrapped it in tarpaulin and buried it there. In times of such hardship, we have to accept it. As for reburial, we'll deal with that when the time comes. Right now, we need to focus on the immediate task." Seeing that village chief still seemed unconvinced, another person offered a suggestion. Chief fears burying the old lady in fields. The water will seep in later, making it difficult to exhume her for reburial. Isn't that right, chief? Nodding, he replied, "That's exactly it. My nature is to always think ahead when it comes to burying those who have passed away. I know it's hard to overcome the difficulties, but whatever we do, we must make sure everything is properly taken care of from start to finish. Only then can I feel at peace." The man continued, "In that case, I have an idea. This way, based on the opinion of Mr. Bay, and also as follows." The village chief and the man named Ba immediately asked in unison, "What idea is that? Tuat, tell us." Tuat sighed deeply, then replied, "Here's what we can do. We will still bury the old lady by wrapping her in a tarpaulin, but bringing her to the cemetery, we would bury her right behind the house in the backyard." The village chief's eyes widened. Bury her in the backyard? In our village, no one buried. When did the person die in the backyard? That makes sense. How could we possibly bury her inside the house? In the backyard, Tuat raised his hand, signaling that he wanted to speak. The village chief fell silent, allowing him to continue speaking. If it hasn't happened before, then now it will. Actually, burying dead in backyard or behind house is not something uncommon. It's just that the customs in our northern region don't practice it that way. I've heard in the south they often bury all the time, and only this way can everything be properly taken care of. You two, listen to me. It's precisely because there is no coffin that we can't bury in the cemetery. Isn't that right? So why not bury right here in the backyard? The land is high and dry. No water can seep in at all. Later on, if one day we need to exhume for reburial, be easier. We just dig up the remains wrapped in the tarp, and that's it. Done taking the old lady over. To build a proper, peaceful, and beautiful grave, isn't this the most practical and efficient solution? Just bury her in the backyard. Thuan can still stay close to her and everything. In grave care is also easier. Are you ready? All right. After listening to Tuat's explanation, the village chief and Ba found it very reasonable. It not only solved the problem of not having a coffin, avoids difficulties. This is difficult to rebury, just right. It made perfect sense emotionally and practically. The village chief walked over to Thuan and patted him on the shoulder, comforted him, then gently asked Thuan, "So, you've heard what everyone said, right? After all, as expected, she was your grandmother. So the decision should be yours. Do you want to bury her in the cemetery or bury her behind the house?" Wiping away his tears and snot with his hand, Thuan sobbed softly, said, "I would like everyone to help me bury my grandmother behind the house." Uncle Tuat said, as he often did, "That's right, let's do it that way. This way you can stay close to her, and it'll be more convenient to take care of her grave, to look after." I asked for everyone's help. That very afternoon, the villagers pooled their rice together and cooked meals, with each bowl of rice topped with a single chicken egg. That was all they had. The villagers expressed their condolences. Some helped dig the grave. Others helped wrap the old woman's body in a tarpaulin, preparing to bury her. Seeing the old woman lying on the tarpaulin, her body completely covered, Thuan's grandmother softly sobbed, ran over to Thuan's bed and grabbed the blanket, mat, and handed it to the people wrapping the tarpaulin, saying, "Uncles, please, wrap this mat around my grandmother too. Down there, like my grandmother, will feel less cold." One person seeing this asked, "You only have one mat, and you're giving it to wrap your grandmother? What will you sleep on?" Thuan immediately replied, "I can sleep on the ground. Just wrap another mat around my grandmother." Following Thuan's request, the old woman's body was wrapped with an extra mat before being lowered into the grave. Without a coffin, they simply covered, pile up soil, build a mound, coat mud outside. Just like that, 7 years have already. Both hands suddenly grabbed a huge frog. He had to use both hands to hold it securely. Thuan was thrilled. In just over an hour, he had nearly filled the basket. Every frog was big and fat, just like the ones at Newt's place that Thuan had once seen. His arms, legs, and face were covered in sweat. Thuan wiped the sweat off his forehead, feeling overjoyed because he had not wasted effort going the cemetery hunt frogs. Thuan thought to himself, "Grandma, please wait. I give you some more time. I'm the best. I will definitely buy you a coffin, take you to the cemetery, and build a grave for you. I'm almost there, Grandma. Just a little." That's right. For the past 3 years, Thuan had been trying hard to save up, and every night he worked hard to save money to re-enter his beloved grandmother. Carrying the heavy basket at his side, Thuan smiled, feeling overjoyed. This past month, Thuan had caught so many frogs. And not just that, each one was plump, fat, and big, each about the size of a hand of a person. The cemetery was a stretch of wild land, with small streams branching off from a canal, winding around the high and low spots, overgrown with shrubs and grass. It was completely unplanned, because the villagers had no reason to come out here, not even during the day. Ponds and stagnant pools of water shimmered faintly. People, so frogs, eels, crabs, and fireflies freely thrived. After a while of catching frogs, exhaustion started to set in, wading through the muddy water from the low-lying grassland. A mound rising higher in the cemetery. Time to rest. The grass is slippery, my feet are muddy with mud, so Thuan staggered and had to use his hands to brace himself and avoid falling. As he hurried upward, Thuan noticed a light ahead of him, like a torch flickering, peeking out from behind a few graves. He was momentarily startled because after all, he was in the cemetery. Thuan shined the flashlight on the light, but the flashlight wasn't strong enough to reach far enough for Thuan to see what it was. In a flash, the red flame had already quickly moved to another spot. Thuan gathered his courage and called out loudly, "Who's there?" Is it not in the dead of night in the middle of a cemetery? Filled with nothing but graves, desolate, his voice echoed even louder, echoing through the air. However, no one answered Thuan's call. The red flame that had just appeared vanished again. Climbing up onto a high mound, Thuan immediately shone his flashlight, battery facing forward. Under the flashlight, the whitewashed graves loomed faintly in the darkness. When the flashlight shone on them, Thuan involuntarily shuddered, especially when the beam lit up one or two graves with rounded mounds, with incense bowls placed right on top of the graves. Looking at the incense bowl beside it, with only red incense ash remaining, Thuan felt his heart beating faster and faster. Thuan thought to himself, "Time to go. This is more than enough." Suddenly, a strange chill. "What exactly do you mean by that?" hastily invaded. When he returned, he suddenly caught his attention. Hit Thuan. Looking down, lay a small clump of soil, pinky-sized. Turning his head to look back, in front of Thuan, the fire from earlier reappeared. This time it was moving deeper into the cemetery. When the flashlight beam swept over it, Thuan could faintly make out the shadow of someone running. Just like that, the fire and that shadow would flicker in and out of view behind the undulating graves in the cemetery of Wong village. Thuan followed the shadow, then shouted loudly, "Nut! Oh, is that you? Nut! Nut! I'm asking you, Nut!" Hey! He kept calling out Nut's name because according to what Hao had said, in this village besides Nut, no one would dare venture into the cemetery to catch frogs. He was probably scared someone saw him, so he pretended to be a ghost and ran off. That fire earlier could have been Nut's torch, because he wanted to ask to find out where Nut was selling frogs and to ask about the prices. Thuan then used the flashlight with a bright beam and chased after the human figure and the moving red flame running into the cemetery. And this cemetery had only one entrance and exit, which was a bridge spanning across a canal. While running after him, Thuan shouted loudly, "Nut! It's me, Thuan. I'm just out here catching frogs like you, not doing anything else. Where are you? Come, Nut!" As he ran, Thuan saw the flame right up ahead. But when he got there, it was gone. The surroundings were desolate and cold. All around the cemetery, the sound of alleys, the sound of the wind, howling steadily, all of it made. Thuan was startled. Shining his flashlight behind a few nearby graves, Thuan lowered his voice, speaking more softly. "Nut, are you perhaps hiding somewhere around here?" He took slow steps, shining the flashlight. In all directions, Thuan stepped backward with the intention of leaving the cemetery. Suddenly, Thuan jerked in shock as the sole of his foot stepped on something hard. It wasn't a rock, it was smooth and cold. Not stone, it is smooth and cold. Stood there for a few seconds, Thuan caught his breath and lifted his foot and shone his flashlight down at the ground. On the grass, amid the muddy footprints left by Thuan, in that layer of grass mixed with mud is a coin. Under the flashlight's beam, the coin gleamed with a bright golden hue. Thuan reached out to wipe the coin clean, but his hand was also covered in mud, so he wiped it on. It only smeared the mud even more. Suddenly, the wind picked up and the sound of it whistling through the graves, chilling howl. It sounded as if someone was moaning. "Creepy. I need to get out of here," Thuan stammered, then hurriedly walked quickly out of the cemetery. As he crossed the bridge over the canal, which was also the time when the rooster crows at the fifth watch. The sound of the rooster crowing in the dim darkness at 3 a.m. helped Thuan shake off the fear he had just felt. Outside the cemetery, heading into the village, households had woken up early to light the stove, cook rice, and prepare to go to the fields. The light from the lamps and the warm smoke rising signaled that a new day was about to begin. With a heavy basket of frogs hanging at his side, Thuan hurriedly made his way briskly toward the thatched mud-walled house located at the end of the village. Once home, Thuan placed the basket of frogs into a basin and covered it. Completely exhausted, he scooped water to wash his hands and feet, his face still weary. Did not forget to take out the coin picked up at the cemetery and wash it clean. Inside the house, Thuan shut the door and plugged 2 electric wires into the yellowed socket. Tied directly to the earthen wall, the light bulb flicked on. Under the dim yellow glow of the small bulb, Thuan took out the coin to examine it again carefully. It was quite a strange coin. The coin had a diameter of about 5 fellamets and was fairly thick. It was golden in color without a hole. One side was engraved with some characters, which looked like Chinese script. The other side of the coin was engraved with 4 figures: dragon, kilin, turtle, and phoenix. If examined closely, there were also 2 lines of grooves dividing the coin into 4 equal sections. Thuan had never seen a coin like that before. Literally, what Thuan was most puzzled about was not knowing whether the coin was made of gold or some other material. From childhood until now, Thuan had never even seen gold, let alone held or owned any. Even as a child, when playing with the neighborhood kids, he once heard one of them say that his dad had come back from working far away and bought his mom a gold ring. When Thuan asked what gold was, the kid burst out laughing, curled his lip, then said, "Gold is very precious," to one's grandmother. "Working your life won't earn money." To buy it, feeling down, Thuan went home and asked his grandma, "What is gold? Is it really that valuable?" "Is it?" Grandma patted Thuan's head and replied, "It's true that gold is very precious and expensive. Our family is poor, so we don't dare to dream of such things." That exact thing. Grandma wants enough rice for her child to eat. It's indeed already a joy every day. Remembering his grandmother's words, Thuan muttered to himself, "If this were gold, I would have it." Money to re-enter and build a grave for Grandma. But how can I know if it's really gold? And also, if it is gold, then why was it lying out in the cemetery? Whose could it be? Did someone drop it? At that moment, I clearly saw a flash of light and a shadow running in that direction. No! If it belongs to someone and they dropped it, then I have to return it. But how can I know whose it is now? The sound of roosters crowing continued to echo throughout Vuong village. Though he hadn't slept all night, Thuan didn't feel tired, partly because caught frogs, partly due to anxiety excitement after picking up the strange coin outside the cemetery. Today is Sunday, so Thuan is not. The sky was also starting to brighten. Thuan didn't plan to sleep anymore since it was almost morning. He opened the door, stepped outside and grabbed his palm leaf hat, put it on his head. Thuan bent down, flipped over the bamboo tray, reached, grabbed the basket of frogs, and went to the district market to sell the frogs he had caught the night before. He gently lifted the lid of the basket. Looking inside, Thuan exclaimed in admiration, "Wow, these frogs are really big. Hopefully, what Hao said is true, and bringing them to the district market will fetch a better price." It takes more than 2 hours to walk from the village to the district. It took more than 2 hours. That's going fast. On the way to the district, he would pass by the brick factory, where Thuan works every day. The brick factory is also located in a neighboring village. Every day going to work, Thuan walks, even though it's quite far. Everyone at the factory keeps telling Thuan to pay an old bicycle to ride. But Thuan was frugal and refused to buy one. Everyone joked and said Thuan was stingy, making life harder for himself. That's life. They didn't know that Thuan was trying hard to save up, barely eating, barely spending on clothes, because he wanted to create a grave for his grandmother. To be safe, Thuan wrapped the coin in a handkerchief and put it into his shirt pocket, buttoned it very carefully, and gently brought it with him to the district. At the same time, outside the cemetery, the ground near the grave where Thuan had found the gold coin began to crack slightly, causing the standing quietly in front of the grave. The one structure had now collapsed. The sound of frogs croaking, the wind blowing through the desolate, dark cemetery seemed to be accompanied by a faint, eerie laughter rising from beneath the sunken grave mound. The object is moving downward, gradually descending towards the ground as it continues its journey from a higher point to a lower one, eventually reaching the bottom. He left home at around 4:30 in the morning, and it wasn't until 7 that Thuan got at the market in the district. The market here opens early. Even before 7 o'clock, the place was already packed with buyers and sellers. With a basket of frogs in one hand and a conical hat in the other, Thuan hurried along, scanning both sides of the road to see if there was any space left to squeeze in and sell. But the vegetable, meat and fish stalls were all crammed tightly together. Even pedestrians had to make way for others. So where could Thuan possibly find a spot to sit? The frogs in the bamboo basket thumped loudly. Still looking around in confusion, Thuan suddenly jumped when someone gently tapped him on the back from behind. "Hey, A woman's voice called out. Thuan turned around, his hand still holding tightly. Conical hat pressed against his stomach. It was a middle-aged woman carrying a basket in her hand. Inside the basket, Thuan could see both vegetables and meat. He stammered, "Yes, you were calling me, ma'am?" The woman smiled gently and pointed at the basket with a warm expression. Of frogs, Thuan's sighed. "Are these frogs for sale?" Thuan quickly replied, "Yes, they are. I got them from a comrade who caught them in the countryside last night. I waded through water and walked all way to District Market but haven't found place. Which one is for sale? Please buy it for me." The woman told Thuan to put the basket down so she could take a look. Seeing the plump, fat frogs in the basket, she was very pleased. So she said, "I'll take all of these. How much do you sell per kilo?" "How much is a kilo?" Thuan bowed his head and replied, "Ma'am, I'm not sure how many kilos there are. Normally, I sell them for 6,000 per kilo. How about this? Could you let me add 1,000 more to make it 7,000 per kilo?" The woman nodded, then replied, "You look kind and honest, and the frogs are big. Each one is plump and fat. A few days ago, I also bought from a skinny, dark-skinned boy. His frogs were really good too. My 2 kids, my husband, and my in-laws all love eating them. I didn't tell that boy, 'If you have it, bring it home. If you don't have it.' The kids kept asking for frog porridge. I went out to the market to look, but couldn't find any stall selling them indeed at all." Hearing the account, little Nut Thuan immediately said, "Yes, that kid is from my village. These frogs look just like the ones he sells, ma'am." "Huh? Caught from the same place?" The woman replied, "Yes, fine. I paid that kid 10,000 per kilo. I'll pay you the same as before. Deal?" Thuan, of course, agreed right away. He smiled happily. "Then please take a look and tell me how much this is worth, ma'am." Gently shaking her head, the woman gave a kind smile. "You're hopeless, kid. If you're going to trade, you have to calculate. Is exact. Who cares about payment? What's the point of calculating the price?" I followed the woman to a fish stall. It is true that the townspeople are willing to come to even the way she spoke was gentle and polite. When she met the fish vendor, the woman said, "Miss, could you help me weigh these frogs to see how many kilos they are?" The fish vendor cheerfully replied, "Of course. Where are the frogs? Let me weigh them for you." Thuan quickly handed the basket of frogs to the vendor. Fish hook basket on scale. Fish seller pulls weight. Towards the end, the tail bites balance. She looked at the scale, then nudged it up a bit. The vendor immediately said, 4.2 kilos. Fresh and lively, you know. Even if a few escaped, it would still be a solid 4 kilos. Wow, you really got yourself some top-quality frogs here. They'll taste great no matter how you cook them. Hey, are you selling these, young man? Mind letting me have half? Big ones like this are really very rare." The woman replied, "Yes, I bought them from him. 6 people in my family, and all love eating frog. Even these 4 kilos might not be enough. Maybe next time then. Thank you," she said, then poured out 40,000 and handed it to Thuan. "Here's your money. Do you have a bag? Pack it up for me." "Do you have a bag? Give it to me." "Thuan, I forgot to bring my bag when I went out this morning." "Here, give this to Thuan. Give him a bag." He just poured the money out for her, and everything was settled. The woman said goodbye to Thuan, greeted the fish vendor, and then left. Thuan also thanked the fish vendor. The fish seller waved her hand, called Thuan back and whispered, "Next time if you have big frogs like that, just bring them here, I'll buy. I'll pay you an extra 1,000 per kilogram." Thuan immediately opened his eyes wide. "Really? That means you're buying at 11,000 per kilogram?" The fish vendor clicked his tongue. "Of course, I'm not a kid to be joking around with you. Frogs are really rare this season, and you caught only big ones, so the price has to be higher. If I had known earlier, I would have bought the whole batch. Remember, whenever you have more, just bring them here. My house is right nearby, so you'll always find me here. Come on, sir, the fish is really fresh today." Yes, yes. Please come take a look, sir." The fish vendor invited the customer. Thuan thanked her once more, and then left, feeling quietly overjoyed. Until now, Thuan had only been able to sell a kilo of frogs for 5,000, and even then it took several buyers. But today, coming to the market, he managed to sell 4 kilos in one go. On top of that, He even got double usual rate and gained a new regular buyer for frogs. Hao said that the timid guy keeps bringing frogs to sell at the market. Though the walk is long, it truly wasn't a waste of effort. Holding 40,000 in his hand, Thuan carefully put it into the side pocket, buttoning it over his chest. He hadn't expected to sell out the frogs so quickly, like that. Passing by some houses, he glanced at the clock tower in the field. It wasn't even 7:30 a.m. yet. Wow, it's not often he gets a chance to come up to the district town, and today he didn't even have to work. He quietly thought to himself that he'd go eat something tasty and stroll around the district town for a bit, then head back to the starting point, home. His stomach was growling with hunger, and as he looked, food stalls. All dishes looked delicious. The pho stall. The aroma of the pho broth was incredibly fragrant. Standing on the sidewalk, he saw the shop owner. A chubby shop owner skillfully slicing beef, placing them into a large bowl, then adding scallions and young green onions, cilantro, and finally ladling broth from a huge pot. Just watching made Thuan's mouth water. The shop owner saw Thuan standing and staring, so he waved him over, saying, "Come on in, young man, have a bowl of pho, and let your life bloom. This pho has been passed down for 3 generations. Thuan wiped his mouth, then asked, "How much is a bowl?" The shop owner replied, 5,000 a bowl. Do you want rare beef pho or well-done pho? Thuan suddenly felt it was really too expensive. He had just managed to afford the reburial for his grandmother. So he bowed his head to the shop owner and quickly walked past the pho stall. A bit further down, he saw an old lady selling sticky rice. Thuan stopped by. "Grandma, can I have 2,000 worth of black bean sticky rice, please?" "Yes." Holding a handful of sticky rice wrapped in banana leaves, Thuan walked while eating and taking in the sights of the streets and various houses in the district town. Thuan stopped and looked at a house where someone had just slid open the metal gate. The house must be quite wealthy. It was a 2-story house, and the man who opened the door was dressed neatly. A dress shirt and trousers. Thuan, any house built with red bricks was fancy. A bit less so would be made of discarded bricks or low-quality bricks. Otherwise, it would just be a thatched house with mud walls. Now looking at the spacious 2-story house, Thuan noticed there was a sign hanging, Lam Trang Jewelry and Precious Stones. While he was still looking, the man of the house shouted, "Hey, what are you staring at? Planning to steal something, huh?" Thuan quickly shook his head, then said hurriedly, "No, sir, I was just passing by. I didn't want to be misunderstood." Thuan quickly walked away. After a few steps, he reached into the pocket on the right side of his chest, the copper, the strange coin, which Thuan was still there. Glancing back at the gold shop, Thuan mustered his courage and turned back. The homeowner saw Thuan and frowned. "What is it now? Don't tell me you're thinking of buying gold too." Thuan quickly replied, I am not buying gold, but I have something, and I'm not sure if you could take a look at it for me." The homeowner clicked his tongue. "Well, here. This isn't a place to appraise things. Throw it away. I'm still open." Thuan held the coin in his hand, quietly wiping it with a handkerchief. Hearing the gold shop owner say that, Thuan was about to turn and walk away when the sharp eyes of the old shop owner caught a glint of golden light from the coin Thuan was holding. He grabbed Thuan's arm and spoke sweetly. "All right then, you look like a kind fellow. Come in here, let me take a look. What do you want to ask about?" He pulled Thuan into the house. The old man jerked his chin toward Thuan's hand. "Are you trying to ask about that thing you're holding? Give it here, let me take a look." Thuan, being honest, immediately handed him a coin. The shop owner, the moment he touched the coin with the eyes of a gold dealer, instantly knew that the coin was real gold, and quite heavy too. But the old man pretended to toss it up and catch it a few times. Then he smacked his lips with an air of disappointment and regret. He asked, "Is this coin made of gold or not?" Thuan nodded and replied, "Yes, sir. Is it gold or not, sir?" The old shopkeeper sighed. "This isn't real gold. You can tell just by looking at it. It's a fake, just gold-plated. Inside it's iron, or maybe copper. If you don't believe me, stand there, I'll heat it and show. Where's this coin from? Don't must be stolen, right?" Thuan quickly waved his hands and replied, "No, it's not stolen, sir. I found it out by the cemetery. I didn't steal it from anyone." The shopkeeper was even more pleased to hear that because this was gold that had been found. He thought to himself, this country bumpkin looks big but is dumb. How can I snatch it from him? This coin? Yeah, indeed, there's a way. The gold shop owner carefully looked at Thuan and said, just to be sure, I'll use a blowtorch to show you. The flame will burn off the outer plating outside. Then we will know this coin is. Wait here for a little moment. The gold shop owner took the coin to a table in the corner. The goldsmith brought the coins to the table in the corner. His fingers lightly brushed against something. His finger just brushed against something inside the desk drawer. Then quickly he applied that substance to the underside of the coin. Then he took a blowtorch along with a stabilizing tool. Determined, the coin was brought out and placed in front of the Thuan. The side coated with the rough black substance was turned toward himself. The other side was left for Thuan to see. The cunning fox didn't forget to pretend and warned, now then, this is your exact coin, okay? So don't go saying I pulled any tricks. Take a look, is that right? Thuan immediately replied, yes, that's right, sir. It's already very kind of you to help me. I would never think that way. So the gold shop owner clicked his tongue and said, if you're going to help someone, you have to help them all the way. That's how I am always getting into trouble helping others. All right, if it is the right one, stand there. Let's see. A blue flame from the torch head made contact with the coin. From the tip of the torch on the coin, ringing, crackling sounds, just snoring, the owner. See, this is mixed with impurities like this when meets fire burns like that. Thuan, completely naive and unaware of the reality, that crackling sound is the sound coming from the rough black substance that the shop owner had deliberately smeared on the back of the coin. No one knew exactly what he had applied, but when it came into contact with fire, it burned steadily, then clung to the surface of the coin and turned into a light brown color, looking like rusty iron. After finishing the torching, the shop owner clicked his tongue repeatedly, putting on a pained expression, and said in a low voice, look at this. They say fire tests gold. This was some torching and it's already tarnished at all. Just look at it yourself, or else you'll say I'm lying. The coin is completely ruined. The shop owner turned the underside of the coin to show. Thuan, the area that had just been torched, had indeed turned brown, rough like an iron surface. His face showed a sorrowful expression. But thinking about it again, it made sense. If it were real gold, would anyone drop it in a cemetery? Thuan sighed. Yes, you're right. It's definitely not real gold. And to think I was so excited, couldn't sleep all night. Thuan reached out to take the coin back, but the shop owner shouted loudly, hey, don't touch it. It's still hot. I just torched it. That's hot to the touch. But Thuan had already touched it with the tip of his finger. It really was still very hot. The tip of Thuan's finger got burned. Immediately, Thuan winced and said, that hurts. So how long do we have to wait for it to cool down? Huh, sir? The shop owner grew annoyed. He thought, damn that kid. I thought if it wasn't gold, he'd just leave it here and walk away. Well, so be it, he said. Then he replied aloud, it'll take about half an hour. Quite a while. You look like struggling from countryside visiting district town. Even though this coin isn't made of gold, it's still quite intricately engraved, like those dragon and phoenix patterns or something like that. You should buy this coin. You can have it replated, turn it into jewelry. What do you say? Are you in? Thuan asked back. Are you really going to buy this coin, sir? Yeah, I'm an adult. Why would I trick you? Do you know what handicrafts are? Thuan shook his head and replied, I don't know. The old man continued, it's those kinds of jewelry that look like gold, but inside they're made of iron, aluminum, zinc, or something like that. This coin is the same. It can be gold-plated and still look nice. You can resell it to people who like to show off. So complicated, D. Are you selling? If not, it will be later. Getting a few scraps of metal like this. That's indeed good enough. Yes, I'll definitely sell it. Without a doubt. Whatever amount you can give me is fine. Because if I take it, I wouldn't know what to do with it anyway. The entire psychological tactic of the gold shop owner had worked. But the old man would still pay Thuan a decent amount, because he had basically just grabbed a solid gold coin. Yet he said 30 dong. I take. Without a moment's hesitation, Thuan nodded and agreed. After groping all night until dawn, catching frogs, he only made 40,000. Now, for this discarded coin, someone was willing to pay 30,000, why wouldn't he sell it? Bringing it home would just mean tossing it away. Thinking that, Thuan happily said, "Yes, sir, I will sell it. Thank you, sir, you're so kind." The shop owner chuckled to himself. He's completely clueless. The ancestors must be watching over me, blessing me first thing in the morning, and some fool brings a whole fortune to give away. So stupid. Once he steps out of here, and I'll have it all back again. And even thank me. Truly a bunch of country bumpkins, barefoot and wide-eyed. He slipped his hand into his pocket and pulled out some money and started counting, paying Thuan full 30,000. With 4,000 left, he handed it all to Thuan, saying, "Here's a little consolation, 4,000 extra. You see, here, it's all yours, something to eat and suffer through. Poor thing, is your hand okay after getting burned?" Thuan held the money, not believing that someone actually bought that scrap iron coin for 30,000. Meanwhile, Thuan vaguely remembered that the price of scrap iron was 2-3K per kilogram. But earlier, the shop owner had said the dragon and phoenix carvings were beautiful. That must be the reason. Plus, he even got an extra 4,000. Thuan happily bowed his head in thanks, and even as he reached the door, he turned back to thank them once more. Well, the coin wasn't made of gold, but Thuan's trip to the district today had already been a huge success, beyond expectations. Not only did he sell the frogs at a high price, but he also gained a new buyer for his frogs. Although earlier he had felt disappointed when the gold shop owner said the coin was just made of iron. In return, Thuan ended up with 34,000 jong. He carefully wrapped it up in a handkerchief. Thuan cheerfully made his way back to Phượng Bãi village. On the way, he occasionally skipped along, because today he had earned significantly more than over 70,000 jong. By the time he reached the village, it was almost noon. The village roads were deserted, as at this hour, everyone was taking their midday rest. The sun was blazing, so no one was out on the streets. Thuan returned home, opened door, stepped inside, then bolted it shut. Crawling under the bed, Thuan gently pried up a patch of hard-packed earth beneath it, then slowly pulled out a brown earthenware jar. He opened the lid of the jar. Inside, Thuan took out a bundle wrapped in oil paper. Carefully, he unfolded each layer of the oil paper. Inside the oil paper was a plastic bag filled with money. The banknotes, ranging from 5,000 to 50,000, were neatly stacked and organized by denomination, with the larger bills at the bottom and the smaller ones on top. He removed a handkerchief. At this point, Thuan added 70,000 earned today in a plastic bag. He then very carefully rearranged everything. Finally, Thuan crawled back under the bed, hid the jar in ground, and pushed hard soil into place. That small ceramic jar contained the money Thuan had painstakingly saved over the past few years, waiting until he had enough to re-enter and build a grave for his grandmother. He hadn't gotten a wink of sleep since last night. At this moment, Thuan truly felt sleepy. His eyes drooped shut. He yawned widely, stretched, twisted his body, and then lay straight down on the bed, falling into a deep, peaceful sleep. He had barely lain down when Thuan was already snoring loudly. Although it was sunny at noon, a gentle breeze blew through the window, making Thuan sleep even more soundly. Just like that, Thuan sank deeper into sleep until he opened his eyes. He found himself surrounded by complete darkness, an eerie, unsettling stillness. Not a single sound could be heard. It's already so dark. Why is it so quiet? Thuan whispered. He intended to plug in the power and turn on the light, but just as he set his foot down from the bed, Thuan was startled to find that what his foot touched wasn't the floor of the house, but water. He quickly pulled his foot back up. His foot was covered in mud. The stench of the mud was overwhelming. Thuan stood there, confused, but all around him was pitch black like ink. Why is there water all over the house? What's going on? Thuan panicked, questioning himself. Suddenly, Thuan appeared, felt an icy coldness beneath him. He was sitting on something that definitely wasn't the familiar rickety wooden bed. This thing was as hard as stone, and it kept radiating a chill that made Thuan shiver uncontrollably. Glancing down briefly, Thuan was horrified to realize he was sitting on a grave coated in white lime. What on earth the hell is this? Thuan panicked, screamed, and hurriedly jumped off. His feet sank into the mud. His mind was in chaos. Thuan turned to look at the grave. The whitewashed grave was the only thing Thuan could clearly see amidst the still darkness. Where is this? Where am I? Thuan jolted, looking around in all directions. The croaking of frogs echoed from every side, reminding Thuan of the scene outside the cemetery last night, just before, early this morning. But why was Thuan at the cemetery? Thuan clearly remembered having gone home and taken a nap, until he opened his eyes and woke up. Am I dreaming? Just as Thuan finished speaking, a large frog jumped. Mud jumped on a very big frog. The frog sat proudly atop a grave. It turned toward Thuan and let out terrifying croaks. When the large frog made those harsh sounds, the entire space immediately fell silent. All was still again, in the dark of night. It seemed as if only Thuan, the white grave, remained with the frog sitting on the grave. The frog began to open its mouth, releasing shiny golden coins from within. At the same time, a voice echoed through the pitch-black darkness. At last, I have met the one I was meant to meet. Come to me and I will just give you. Everything you have ever absolutely wished for. Thuan looked around and asked, "Who's there? Who's speaking? Are you human or a ghost?" The voice replied, "I am neither human nor ghost. I am a fearsome and powerful demon, and I have caught you." Still trembling with fear, Thuan suddenly felt something stirring beneath his feet. It was a mass of grotesque hands, rising up from the slimy, sticky mud, clinging to Thuan's feet. Thuan screamed in terror. Let me go!" he shouted as he pulled his legs free and tried to run. But in the engulfing darkness, Thuan had no idea where to go. Yet those grotesque hands kept emerging, chasing after his every step. The muddy ground was soft and slippery. The mire grew thicker and deeper until Thuan could no longer lift his feet. Those black, slimy hands and fingers gripped Thuan's legs tightly, slowly, creeping up his body and wrapping around him, dragging him down into the muddy pit. Just like that, Thuan could feel his body sinking faster and faster. Only his two arms were flailing upward, desperately hoping to grab onto something, anything, or everything. Suddenly, before Thuan's eyes appeared the figure of someone he knew very well. This person was dressed in a simple outfit, with white hair and age spots visible clearly on the wrinkled skin. As the person bent down and reached out to grab Thuan's hand, Thuan choked back his tears and stammered, "Grandma! Grandma! Grandma, save me!" The moment Thuan tightly grasped his grandmother's hand, the darkness that had been enveloping the space dissolved. A blinding light burst forth from his grandmother's figure, forcing Thuan to shut his eyes. He heard someone's voice calling his name. "Hey Thuan, please wake up. What's going on?" Thuan opened his eyes but didn't get up, lying still, motionless for a few seconds. Shape favorable. Of everything, was it real or just a dream? Then he saw Hao, the one who had just called out to him, sigh in relief and say, "Awake yet? Wake up! Come on, get up!" Thuan's hand was still tightly gripping Hao's hand. Looking out the window, the sun was still shining, and a gentle breeze was still blowing. Only now did he realize he was still lying on the rickety wooden bed in Thuan's house. Was it a dream? Thuan was sweating profusely, his lips trembling as he asked Hao. At that moment, Hao clicked her tongue and said, "Can you let go of my hand now? What kind of dream were you having, flailing your arms and legs? I had to grab your hand to stop you from thrashing around. That's your own doing. Get up, go outside and wash your face. Clear your head. Dreaming about what, huh? You're about to die, crying all over the place. Get up." Letting go of Hao's hand, Thuan mumbled, half awake, half dazed, "Isn't it nighttime yet?" Thuan's question left Hao bewildered, especially since it was clearly still sunny outside. Hao pulled Thuan up, held out his hand in front of Thuan, rubbed it a few times, then asked, Is your brain having issues? It's just early afternoon. How could it be nighttime already? Love of 1,000 chapters? Something big just happened. Go wash your face, and then say Thuan still hadn't fully recovered yet." From the strange dream, it had felt so real that Thuan could still vividly remember every detail of it. Even when, getting out of bed, Thuan carefully looked to see whether it was solid ground or a puddle of mud and water. That eerie, chilling sensation running down his spine was still there. Whenever Thuan thought about being surrounded by countless blackened, skinny, bony hands, grabbing and pulling him down into the mud, it wasn't until he just made it outside that Hao scooped up water to wash Thuan's face, and only then did he snap out of it and realize it had been a dream, a nightmare. After Thuan finished drying his face, Hao finally asked, "Hey, I have a question. You have to answer honestly, okay?" Thuan immediately replied right away, "What? Is it something? What's the matter? You look so serious. But why did you come to my house?" Hao immediately continued, "Of course there's something important. That's why I rushed over here to find you. Come inside. This isn't something to joke about. It's a big deal." He grabbed Thuan's hand and pulled him into the house. Seeing Hao's demeanor, Thuan suddenly felt a pang of anxiety. There must be something serious going on for Hao to be so flustered and pale like that. At this point, Thuan asked, "You're making me really worried. What on earth is going on?" "I'm so worried. What's going on?" Hao responded to Thuan with a question of his own. "Did you go to the cemetery last night?" His voice was trembling, which made Thuan start to tremble too. Following that, Thuan stammered, I did, but why?" Hao swallowed hard and looked at Thuan with a fearful gaze. "That timid guy, he's dead. He died out there in the cemetery last night." Hearing what Hao said, Thuan broke out in goosebumps. His spine turned cold. Thuan stammered again, speaking slowly. "Not really died in the cemetery last night." Hao immediately frowned as she heard the unexpected news and said, "Does my face look like I'm joking? This is a matter of life and death for a person. Who would be crazy enough to joke about something like that?" "Heard the news, I rushed here to ask you." Thuan quickly waved his hands. "I don't know anything. Last night, after talking with you out in the fields, I went to catch a few frogs, but I didn't see that timid guy anywhere." Hao immediately clicked his tongue and said, "Calm down. Who said you killed him that you're panicking like this?" "So," I asked again, "the night you caught frogs in after catching frogs that night?" Thuan immediately replied, I don't really remember clearly. I think it was around 3 a.m. or maybe a little later." But then how did the timid kid end up dead? Hao fell into thought for a moment and then said, 3 a.m. That's the time you got back, when the kid headed to the cemetery. Strange, isn't it? Normally, the two, you should run into each other or at the cemetery. Because the path to the cemetery only has one way in. You have to cross a scary bridge, you know? He died right in the grave of Mrs. Van's family. His father said that around 3 a.m. last night, he grabbed a torch, took a lantern, and carried a basket saying he was going to the cemetery to catch frogs. His father tried to stop him, saying the village elders had already warned everyone not to go out there anymore. But he didn't want to miss out on the frogs. He said he would go one last today. Starting tomorrow, he wouldn't go anymore. He even added he would be careful not to dirty other people's graves. His father was sick, so he couldn't stop him. He left. At that time, even by noon, he still hadn't come back. His dad thought he was using the lantern to catch frogs to sell them in the district. So about as late as 2 p.m., there was still no sign of him. His father was burning with anxiety. It was as if something was pushing or urging them. They lit incense sticks. After 3 tries, the incense still wouldn't burn. It would catch a little, then they put in the incense bowl. It would go out. Something bad happened to his son. His father took a walking stick to look for him. When he got close to the bridge, spanning the canal, he ran into villagers who were heading out to the fields. Was going to field saw, father of boy playing drums. They stopped to ask what was going on. After hearing the story, they went to the cemetery together to search for Nut. They searched and found his body face down by Mrs. Van's grave. There was water at the bottom of the grave. Everyone guessed he fell into the grave, then passed out, and because he was lying face down, he suffocated to death. The village was gathered at the cemetery over there. Hearing that, Thuan got goosebumps all over. When they arrived, Thuan's face turned pale. He asked, But why was Mrs. Van's family digging a grave out there?" Hao immediately continued, "Mrs. Van's husband has been sick for over a month and he's on the verge of death. I heard that 2 days ago her family had someone dig the grave. When her husband dies, he can be buried. They had a fortune teller from the neighboring village read their fortune. And the fortune teller said that something was wrong with her husband. So once he dies, must be buried at once. Otherwise, someone in the house must die with him. Dad saw his child's body down in the grave and fainted on the spot. It was heartbreaking to see. The more he talked about it, his village was bad. It's so hard. Poor for generations. Raise your head, go to town, go to district. So everything changed so quickly. Back home, it wasn't just because of poverty. That nut had to die. At that moment, Thuan suddenly remembered the time outside the cemetery, the moment when Thuan saw a blaze of fire, along with a shadowy figure running toward him. Could it have been Nut? Startled, Thuan immediately asked, "What happened? Did you see him last night?" Thuan replied, "Yes. I couldn't see his face clearly. I only saw a shadow dot past ahead me, but it could very well have been Nut." "How so? Tell me more clearly," Thuan continued. "It was around 3 a.m. At that time, I had just caught a basket full of frogs, and then I rode over to a mound to sit and rest. Suddenly, I saw a small flame appear, moving into the cemetery. When I shone my flashlight at it, the flame disappeared. A few seconds later, just as I was about to leave, someone threw a small clump of dirt, size of a finger, at my back. I turned around and saw the flame appear again. It was Nut. I called out. I called, but no one answered. Caught glimpse of figure running deep into the cemetery. So it must have been Nut." "What happened next?" Thuan replied, "Because I wanted to ask him how the frogs were selling up in the district and how things were going, so I also ran in the direction of that flickering light. But clearly, I saw a red glow, but when I got there was no one. I kept calling for him, but he never answered. The wind picked up. Scared, I ran out of the cemetery to head back home." Hao sighed heavily, his voice filled with sorrow. "So that means..." "That's right. It was Nut. Who else could it be? If only you had seen him. Maybe he wouldn't have died." But the story isn't over yet. There's still one more thing, and it's even scarier. The story of Nut. Dying in the cemetery didn't frighten the villagers as much as this next story. Thuan swallowed hard and stammered, "What else? What else is there?" Hao glanced around nervously. Even though they were inside the house with the doors tightly shut, Hao whispered, "When people went out to the cemetery to look for that Nut guy, they discovered that the grave right in the center of the cemetery had sunk into the ground. Around there are cracks. Died inside Mrs. Van's grave, and everyone said as he went to the cemetery to spear frogs disturbing the graves and the spirits, so he ended up losing his life. But if you think about it, if he fell into the grave, he would have sprained an arm or a leg. How could he have ended up face down, drowned and dead? The village elders are still worried. Things outside the cemetery haven't stopped with Nut's death. Maybe this whole village will have to bear the misfortune. I am definitely telling you, right now, the whole village is in complete chaos. It's best don't tell anyone that story. Going to the cemetery last night with the old caretaker, I understand your situation. If people find out that besides Nut, you were also out there last night, I'm afraid the villagers won't leave you alone. Do you understand what I mean?" Thuan's face turned pale. He really didn't expect that after one night such tragic and terrifying events would happen. Last night, Thuan was at the cemetery, but he had no idea about any of it. Feeling sorry for Nut, he also felt sorrow for his own fate. Moreover, what Hao had just said was not without reason. After all, for generations, the villagers of Phượng Bãi considered cemetery a sacred place, solemn place that must not be disturbed. That's why it was extremely rare for anyone to venture out there, unless their family had some business related to graves and tombs. Nut's death only further confirmed that any act of desecrating the resting place of the deceased would have to be paid for with one's own life. Thuan got goosebumps, his hair standing on end as he recalled the dream he had just had. There was no way Thuan would dream about it. Such a terrifying dream. Thuan muttered, "Mouth. Could it be that after Nut it'll be my turn?" Hao felt a chill run down his spine when he heard Thuan say that. Whole person. Hao immediately replied, "Damn it, why would..." "Come to that. Nut went out there a lot. Not to that extent. Nahut goes there a lot. So many times, and even desecrated the grave. So if he really was cursed by a ghost or spirit, it would make sense. But you didn't do anything. Honestly, I feel guilty toward you. If only last night I hadn't told you about Nut. You wouldn't have gone to the cemetery. If you hadn't known, it would have been fine. You overthink this matter. You can't just ignore it. The elders have a saying, better safe than sorry. If you're cautious, you'll stay safe, or As he was speaking, Hao suddenly stopped. He hesitated. Thuan immediately asked, Or what? Is there something you want to say? Hao clicked his tongue and said, I was about to suggest you go see a fortune teller, see what they say. Just sitting here worrying. That won't solve anything like that, okay? Thuan thought for a moment, then replied, But where are you? From the beginning until now, when I know what fortune teller? Hao immediately said, Just now I mentioned that in the neighboring village there's a fortune teller who did a reading for Mrs. Van's family. I heard this fortune teller is really good. Given how things are now, if we don't go see him, we'll just stay anxious. Better to go and ask for his help. If nothing's wrong, that's great. And if there's a problem, we can ask him to intervene, to turn misfortune into safety, and safety into blessings. Are you going? If you are, I'll go with you. But will it be expensive? Hao immediately replied, Well, no one's gone yet, so how would we know? Just bring a few dozen, thousand, and we'll figure it out there. It's fortune-telling session. It won't be expensive. Hearing that, Thuan thought he should go get a reading to ease his worries. Agreed. Seeing that, Hao went outside to wait while I burn incense for my grandmother. Must again. Take money from the porcelain jar buried under the bed. After lighting incense inside the house, Thuan went to the backyard to light incense at his grandmother's grave. In the nap dream earlier, Thuan had seen his grandmother clasping her hands in prayer in front of the mud-covered grave. For the past 7 years, plants had grown lush and green, completely covering the grave. Since it was buried behind the house, Thuan often trimmed the grass and plants, so even though the grass grew, it looked very beautiful. After praying to his grandmother, Thuan and Hao went over to the neighboring village to find a fortune teller. By now, it was already past 3 p.m. When lighting incense, Thuan hadn't noticed that the incense holder on his grandmother's grave, for some unknown reason, had developed a crack starting from the bottom spreading upward. A few blades of grass on the grave also began to turn a scorched yellow. Was the nightmare not yet over? Was it a dream or reality? Thuan believed that his grandmother's spirit had returned, continually blessing and saving him. Thank you to our dear audience for tuning in. Goodbye, everyone, and look forward to seeing you again in the next episode of the story. Coming up